Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Julianna Burmesch, a former school principal, speech pathologist, early brain development trainer, parent educator, and child advocate. In writing her memoir, Life with Less of Me, she wants to help people understand the effects of adverse childhood experiences and unresolved trauma on one's long-term physical and mental health. Julianna is a mother, a grandmother, potter, an occasional jewelry artist. She lives in Wisconsin with her husband, John, and her beautiful dogs, Bella and Ruby. Julianna, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. I've been looking forward to our conversation for quite a while now.
Thank you, and I'm excited to be here.
And we have to give a shout out to Angel Barbizon, the lead publicist for Books Forward. Angel is my favorite publicist by far. She emailed me and said, I have a great guest for your podcast. I read your background, read a little bit of the intro to your book, which we're going to be talking about. And I got back to her and said, yeah, she'll align nicely with the other guests that I've had on the podcast. And I'm just glad we were able to make this happen today.
Yes, I love Angel. She has really done great work for me.
Yeah, she is certainly puts out 100% plus effort for her authors. And she's a great communicator. As a podcast host, she makes my job easy because she sends me so much advanced information about her authors that it makes it easier for me to make a decision. It also makes it easier for me to plan the podcast. But anyway, you've got quite a story. You've got quite a journey. And so I want to get right down to it and start asking you some questions. So,
Great.
as you know from my background, I'm an adjunct professor of psychology, child life at Utica University. And in one of the courses that I teach, I tell my students that early childhood experiences matter. Can you describe the early childhood experiences that have informed the work that you do today?
Yes, I grew up in a home where both my parents were alcoholics. My dad was physically abusive to my mother and actually to some of the pets in our home. And to me, he was a narcissist in that he didn't consider other people's feelings at all. A good example of that would be my mom had a gallbladder attack, a severe gallbladder attack. And I was at my 4-H teacher's home because of our home situation. My mom did not have the personal resources to help me with the project. So the 4-H teacher invited me over. And my mom was supposed to pick me up, but she was extremely ill. And my dad's pat answer for this situation and for any other situation was, well, just let her be there. Just leave her there. His way of abdicating all responsibility, even when my mom was really ill. He only attacked me once. However, when you're physically assaulted and have a parent that is volatile and assaults other people, you're always waiting for it to happen again. You're always on eggshells. And that was the environment I lived in.
Yeah, I mean, from reading the first pages of your book, that was chaos on steroids. You didn't know, as I can recall, which version of your dad was going to be walking in the door that night, what you're going to be running into. And that type of unpredictability just really takes a toll on the family members, on the children, and you learn hypervigilance very quickly because that,
Yes.
the,
And it changes your brain. My background in early brain development taught me as an adult that these things that happen to me, for example, I give an example of getting stopped by a police officer for speeding. And I totally overreacted to the situation. And there are many instances that I show in my book where that happens. Because when I'm under stress and emotionally charged, all of a sudden my brain goes to the emotional center of my brain, which causes me to enter a fight or flight
yeah,
attitude where I feel like, oh no, I'm in danger, or someone I care about is in danger. And it takes all the resources away from my logical brain. And once I learned that childhood trauma really affects the development of your brain, and I'm not talking about like small things. I want to assure parents that your child has one traumatic event, or maybe you get divorced. That's not going to permanently ruin your child's life.
yeah.
I'm talking about multiple adverse childhood experiences that go on for a long time. The abuse in my household,
Mm,
the abuse of my mother went on my whole life.
mm,
And the unpredictability of my dad went on for my whole life. The alcoholism.
yeah.
So I just want to assure parents not to overreact to what I'm saying, in that small things won't hurt your child. Children need to understand that things don't always go their way, you know?
And absolutely. And I mean, through early childhood and later childhood development, we all have stages, we all have challenges that we have to negotiate, especially when we hit puberty, but that's a normal part of child development. But what you're talking about are events that are steeped in unpredictability, steeped in violence, whether emotional violence, psychological violence, physical violence. And these are events that have an indelible effect on a child. And if that narrative isn't intervened with early on, that child is going to go into adulthood having difficulty with intimacy, with relationships, as you mentioned, having extreme responses to situations that other individuals might look at as not being a big deal. Hypervigilance becomes the norm. Um, Safety becomes the norm. And again, the cortisol levels are off the map.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, what you're talking about is not simply negotiating developmental milestones or challenges. This is trying to negotiate and survive trauma. And not only were you physically abused, I think you mentioned, and I remember reading this in the book. I think you were about 5 years old. I think when this happened, was it 5 or a little older at that?
A little older than that.
Yeah. But you were kicked.
Mhm.
You were under the bed. Your dad was kicking you. Well,
Yes.
but you also, in addition to being the direct victim of abuse, you witnessed your dad abusing your mother and everybody else in the family. That vicarious type of traumatization has that same effect.
Yes, it does. And the reason I wrote the book is to show that that kind of childhood has a long-term. Great, you have it.
I have it, of course I did.
Right.
There we go. I
There you
haven't.
go. Has a long-term effect on your physical and mental health. People say that kids are resilient, and they are. However, in a home with multiple adverse childhood experiences, multiple traumas occurring, it wears at your organs, and it can turn on different genes that might not have been activated. There's a science called epigenetics, which really gets into how experience can actually change your genes. But all of that can have a long-term effect, not only on your mental health, but also your physical health.
Mhm.
And I try and make those connections in my book.
And that's the other thing that resonated with me is I believe that there's a mind-body connection. I believe that what happens to us in our families, the experiences that we have, our thought process and our beliefs that are formed as a result of those experiences also translate into physical issues if those beliefs aren't modified, if the narrative isn't modified, and if somehow that cycle of generational trauma isn't broken.
That gets at the heart of my book. Thank you.
You're welcome. And by the way, for my audience, your book is coming out. I believe it's going to be released on June 23rd.
Yes.
And I had a chance to get an advanced copy from Angela. Let me tell you, it's a wonderful book. It's memoir, part memoir, mostly part memoir, blends memoir with science very effectively. It is a very poignant read. As I mentioned before we recorded today, everything's out on the table. I mean, your
Mhm.
experience, how it affected you, how it affected your family, how it affected you moving forward, both physically and emotionally. It's all out there, and it's a really good description of the effects of ACEs and ongoing physical and emotional health. So thank you for writing that and doing what you did with you putting the book out. Can I ask you, was this a difficult process at times for you to writing the book?
It was extremely difficult. I had sought help throughout my life with different therapists. However, I also hid who I was. I was afraid to reveal how damaged I felt I was. The first time I sought help, I was getting help for claustrophobia because there's a story in the book that shows how an experience I had in my childhood affected me as an adult. And part of that process of getting help for claustrophobia, I met with a psychiatrist and did an inventory assessment, and he found out that I had a severe anxiety disorder. However, when I started working with my therapist on the claustrophobia, she thought that that assessment was an anomaly because I presented myself as a competent professional, and she couldn't believe that I could have had an underlying anxiety disorder. Sometimes in therapy, I was doing more advising the therapist on how to manage their children than helping me until I started writing this book. And that's when I decided that I had to meet with a trauma therapist. And I got a referral to a wonderful, wonderful therapist. And I've been working with her for 6 years with EMDR. I had PTSD from what happened
Mhm.
to me. And that's when I started really dealing with my trauma because in order to write this book, I had to relive the trauma. I had to get into what was I feeling at that time, what was my heart doing? And it triggered a trauma response all over again. And I knew if I was going to write this book, I couldn't do it without real serious help.
The way the book is laid out, it's laid out, you talk about events at certain ages of your life, at age 3, at age 20, it's a developmental perspective of how
Mhm,
trauma evolves throughout the lifespan.
mhm.
And, the challenges that you are still dealing with as an adult. And I think it's a great teaching tool, I think, for anybody who wants to really, demonstrate to a class or to a group, this is the effect of ACEs. These are the effects of the first childhood experiences. If unattended to, if not addressed, this is what can happen in later life. So, what inevitably do you want individuals to take from your book, Life with Less of Me?
Child experiences matter, first of all. I think at this point in our society, parents are under tremendous stress.
Mm.
The cost of childcare is more than a college education in some cases.
Mhm.
Housing costs are ridiculous. Healthcare costs are crazy.
Mhm.
A person who makes $30,000 a year cannot survive, particularly when they're the only caregiver
Yep.
in the home. Stress takes away resources, psychological resources, because you're always trying to get by. We need to look at things like universal health care. I think New Mexico right now is experimenting with universal child care. Can you imagine the difference having quality universal child care access for parents, taking that huge cost, which sometimes can be half their income,
Yep.
away from them? The resources those parents would have to attend to their children and to help them be who they can be.
Parents today, I mean, they're dealing with challenges that I never had to deal with as a parent. I never had to deal with it as a college student. And I've said this in other settings that just because you marry the love of your life doesn't mean you're going to be a great parent in the process. I believe that there should be some skill building. There should be some type of preparatory class or classes that they take. And I don't know if he could make it mandatory, but certainly strongly suggested to say that this is the difference between being just great partners and being great parents. And there's a
Mhm.
different set of skills, and these are the skills that you need to develop. Particularly things like how to negotiate with your child, how to impose discipline or boundaries without yelling, without, physicality. And also a little self-care in the process because it can be stressful, raising children, particularly if you're a single parent. So I honestly think that some type of parenting skills workshop or life skills training should be a part of the deal.
And that is another thing that I advocate for in my book. It's birth support for the first year of life
Yep.
so that there is someone who can help to make sure that the child has attached to the parents and the parent has attached to the child.
Mm.
Monitor for postpartum depression. Help to make sure parents understand that children need to have three-dimensional experiences with their environment.
Yeah.
Screens under 2 shouldn't be used with young children. I understand if, you know, you turn on a music video or something just so you can get dinner ready or something like that. But as a principal, one of the things I was really, really concerned about is I served kids who were 3 years old with special needs in my school, and I started the 4-year-old kindergarten program in Wausau. And the concern I had is that kids would come to school not knowing how to calm down without a device.
Mhm.
So we'd have kids who maybe have a sharing problem with another kid or whatever, and they go into a full-blown temper tantrum. Children learn how to calm down from temper tantrums between the ages of 1 and 3, normally. However, that window is missed when the child's handed a device to quiet them. And those are the things that not everybody knows. You know, people there's a lot of things advertising, games and things for young kids or videos for kids to watch, and parents think, that's an idea, that looks fun for my kid. Or child development needs to be taught to
Mhm.
young parents, and having a birth support person in your home weekly or every other week, whatever, during the first year can really set the ground work for learning.
And then you also look at the fact that in age 2, they're learning a sensory motor. I mean, they're hands-on. They learn. I mean, children get an understanding of their world through play, and it's usually hands-on. It's interactive. It's learning cooperative play with other children. It's very difficult for those skills to develop if you're giving your child a device and letting them look at the screen for hours on end. It also sounds like, too, excessive screen time interferes with the child's natural ability to self-regulate.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is the concern that I've heard from teachers, and also concerns from parents saying, my child is acting out and I don't know what's going wrong, what's happening.
Mhm.
It's only I can give them a device and then they'll calm down. But they're just getting distracted. They're not
Yep.
learning to calm themselves down.
No.
Parents don't know that. And right now, because of all the stresses they're undergoing, I can understand reaching for the TV or reaching for a device because of the fact that parents need to get things done and they're under a lot of pressure.
Absolutely. As an educator myself, I work with a lot of trauma-affected students. What do we as educators need to understand in order to meet the needs of those students inside and outside of the classroom?
Teachers need to understand that school is a safe haven. For me, school was a safe haven. I was able to be away from home because we had an activity bus at the end of the day, or that took us home sometimes after 6 o'clock at night. And in that way, school took me away from a lot of the violence
Yeah.
that was occurring in my home. And that was very helpful to me. That teacher, the classroom teachers, could be the only people that these children have to talk to.
Yep.
Sometimes the kids come in and are unregulated because perhaps they were left at home with 3 siblings and no food in the house for the whole weekend. I believe in consequences for kids, but I believe those consequences should match the crime per se, not really. If a kid comes from that kind of situation and they lose it
Yep.
in the morning, they shouldn't lose the big event at the school year, at the end of the school year. Consequences need to be small, logical, and once they're done, the kid needs to be forgiven for whatever happened.
Yep.
I believe in unconditional positive regard for kids. Every day is a new day.
Mm-hmm.
I am so happy to see you today. You know, I see you have your Pokemon shirt on today. That's really awesome. You know, getting to know and develop relationships with kids is key.
And treating the behavior separately from the child is also very key. The behavior is a part of the child. It's what the child did, but it doesn't reflect on the self-esteem of the child or their inherent good qualities that they have. We need to be able to look beyond the behavior and take a look at the strengths that that child or adult has. And the other thing as an educator, one of the things I tell my students is that I focus on creating a very safe environment, a stress-free environment. Because I tell my students, I don't know what's going on in your lives outside of my classroom. So if I can create a safe environment for you where learning is fun, where we can interact, then I've done my job. In addition to giving you information that you need to be competent in the subject matter. But the other piece, and I think particularly at the college level, I think some educators miss this, is they see students as only being students. That the sun sets and shines on whatever requirements they have in their syllabus. And based on my own personal experiences, and I know based on yours, we know that students have other categories that they're dealing with that may affect their ability to be in the classroom, that may affect their ability to attend to the information that you're giving them, that may cause them to be distracted. So it's our job to honor that. And I tell my students, look, if life's getting in the way of school, let me know and I'll work with you. Because what it's about, it's not just imparting information, it's developing relationships. So that student will come back to you and when there's an issue and maybe develop some type of a mentor-mentee relationship.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I had a friend tell me a story this morning where she was in a college class and a very, very bright student. But as an adult, her mother had mental health challenges and had to leave the home. Her dad was dying of cancer, and she had to be the parent and caregiver in her home while she was taking this class. And she got a C on a test, and the teacher went to her and said, "I'm disappointed in you." And that teacher had no idea what was happening in that child's life. And I mean, she was an adult. So it's also with adults. You know, we can't assume that they're having an okay time, even if they look it. Because I looked professional,
Mhm.
but I was really having a hard time. You know, you need to look beyond what's happening and say, "Are you okay?" You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you okay with what's going on? Like, I would have taken the approach that, yeah, I would have said something like, I've seen your performance in class, and I know this test is not a reflection of the capabilities I believe you have. and they give her an opportunity to talk if she's comfortable about what was going on that contributed to that. But yeah, it isn't just about, it's about context, and we need to understand context if we're going to meet the needs of our students. And that context dictates that we need to meet each of those students' needs on an individual basis, depending on what's going on.
Yes.
What is the relationship that you've seen from your own personal life or from just research that you've done between childhood trauma and long-term physical and mental well-being?
Well, I'm a poster child for that. And that's why I wrote the book, because as a child, my physical needs were pretty much ignored. I had infections that went untreated. I had broken bones that were not treated until quite a bit later. I had, and this isn't even in my book, I had chronic ear infections when I was a child. And when I was in 4th grade, I had my hearing tested, and they found out that I had a 30 decibel hearing loss, which was really affecting my ability to read. I finally got treatment when the school district contacted my parents, my mom, because she was a primary caregiver, and I did get treated for those ear infections. Things that happen in our childhood can change your biology. As an adult, I have had sepsis from a bladder infection. I've had necrotizing fasciitis, which is a flesh-eating infection, and I get into detail about how that happened in my book. I've had cancer, and the cancer affected my heart. Thankfully, since I started therapy and dealing with that, my heart is doing well. I'm so excited. But these things that happen in childhood erode your organs through cortisol being washed on them.
Yep.
And my body has less resistance to infections. You're going to read my story and hear and figure out what happened to me in childhood ended up following me into adulthood. So things that happen in childhood have a long-term effect on people, but it's also affecting our healthcare system, because people like me use a lot of healthcare. If you have 3 or more adverse childhood experiences, you are more likely to have diabetes, mental health problems, cancer, infections, and the list goes on. Autoimmune difficulties. Quality childhood leads to people who are healthier, who are more successful, people who avoid incarceration. There's so much data out there about that.
And I'm just glad you're able to sit up and take nourishment and talk about all of this, because reading your book, there was a couple of times I said, boy, how'd she make it out of there alive? And how did she come out of her challenges alive? So I think it's just a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and you are, for the fact that you've been able to transcend it and do some meaningful work with your book and the other work that you're doing in your community. So I think it's great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I got a couple of other questions for you, though. Trauma triggers. I know you talked about those in your book. What are they? What are some practical techniques you can recommend to help individuals address them?
Well, the first practical technique is getting help.
Yes.
Seeing a licensed trauma therapist. But through that therapy, I have learned that things like grounding myself. When I'm feeling, I can feel it in my chest, like I am physically stressed. when I feel that way, I need to ground myself. I need to start touching the table. This is smooth and shiny, and touch the couch and focus on that I am in a safe environment. I am not in danger. The other thing, things like sour candies can help you become into the present. Um, Relaxation, breathing, all these techniques can really help. Um, the problem is if it happens in an environment where you can't like dig out and find a piece of candy, or you can't get up and start walking around. Um, to recognize when people you're around may be feeling traumatized, because there are some situations where there are particular people that um, trigger me, and it's not their fault. It's just that something that they do, some mannerism, triggers me. Other things like loud noises.
Yep.
Loud noises can really trigger me because I lived in a home that was unpredictable.
Mhm.
And I was in a video class, and my grandkids were over in the other room, but I started hearing loud noises, and it just took me totally off my game. I was not able to participate in that class with my adult brain working because of the noise in the background.
Yeah, I mean, those type of environmental triggers, loud noises, people in the environment that may remind you of individuals who have abused you, even the way they talk, their mannerisms, all of that can can trigger flashbacks to the event or events that caused the trauma in the first place. And that's why I think being proactive as educators is important. Creating safe environments are important. Because again, we just don't know the histories of many of our students unless they, at least in my case, they make me privy to that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in your book that struck me, this was on page 4. I read this, I saw this sentence, and I said, this was profound in its simplicity, but profound, is that toxic stress eats away at you, particularly when it's unpredictable.
And that is absolutely true. It would be better if I knew my dad was going to come home raving drunk every Friday night, and that I would know that on Friday nights I have to watch out. But my dad was so unpredictable
Yep.
that I had to be on guard all the time when I was around him. And that is very harmful to a child.
Yep. No, I think the other thing that can be harmful, and as I recall, I mean, there were times that your dad actually was very praising of you, particularly for your accomplishments, particularly for other stuff that you did. So when you have a father who's abusive and then a father who's demonstrating some type of attention or love towards you, it's like we're trained to love, we're conditioned as kids to love our parents. But
Mm-hmm.
that's got to be conflictual when on the one hand you're seeing he's abusive, he's unpredictable, he's drunk, he's violent, and on the other hand, he's loving. That's got to be conflictual in and of itself.
It is. And for me, I took the message when he was praising me for things because he praised accomplishments.
Yep.
The things that I did happened because I wanted to be away from them, I spent so much time at school, but he praised me for accomplishments. So in my mind, I took away the message that I'm only worthy when I accomplish things.
Yep. Yep.
And all of my self-worth was in accomplishing things
And
and
the
not
other,
in
oh,
myself.
yeah. The other thing, and I was thinking you mentioned you described him as being narcissistic.
Mhm.
So your accomplishments fed his look good ego as well too.
Right.
So it served a purpose for him.
I was a gymnast, not a very good gymnast, actually, but I was a gymnast. And when friends or family members came over, he'd clear the living room of furniture and ask me to, demonstrate my skill. So it was, yeah, he used it for social capital.
I remember though there were instances of that throughout the book where
Hmm.
you commented on that. So Juliana, you've left us with so many good things today. You shared your story, you shared your heart, and I appreciate it. And I know my audience is going to, but I'm going to ask you if you want our audience to remember one thing from today, from this conversation, what would that takeaway be?
What happens to kids matters in their long-term physical and emotional development. And investing in children is the most valuable investment you can have
Yes.
because it helps with healthcare, it helps with economic development, it helps with lowering incarceration. Invest in children.
That's sound and sage advice. So thank you for that. And my last question, if my audience wants to contact you, purchase your book, find out more about what you're doing in the world, what's the best way for them to do that?
Go to my webpage, juliannaburmesch.com. And there's a contact form on that page. You can order my book. There are links to order my book on that page. I'd love to hear from you. I really would.
Yep. And one more time, there's the book, Life with
Eh,
Less of Me.
Yes.
So there
Thank
you
you
go.
so much.
You're welcome. Thanks again, Juliana, for just a wonderful conversation today. I truly enjoyed it. And maybe we can do this again in the future sometime.
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.